Let me pose a question to you. When everything around you is in turmoil, who do you turn to? Is it the most vocal individual in the room, barking orders and assigning blame? Or is it the person who remains composed, who listens before speaking, who doesn't waver under pressure, who behaves as though nothing, and I mean nothing, can unsettle them? There's an appealing quality about such individuals, something dependable, something secure. And here's the reality, they weren't born that way, they acquired it. They learned that control doesn't come from managing the world, but from managing oneself. Life will throw unexpected challenges, deadlines will shift, people will let you down, plans will crumble. But you can learn to maintain the same expression, the same tone, the same composure, no matter what's happening. Why? Because tranquility is a superpower. It's not about pretending things don't matter, it's about choosing what deserves your energy. It's about separating what you feel from how you respond. You can feel frustration and still speak with grace. You can feel anger and still move with clarity. That's not weakness, that's mastery. You become the thermostat, not the thermometer. You set the tone regardless of the temperature around you. Because when others are floundering, your calm becomes a mirror. People borrow your belief, they steady themselves on your presence, and that is leadership. So no, this isn't about being cold or fake or disconnected. It's about being so grounded in who you are that nothing on the outside can dictate what happens inside. Acting as if nothing affects you doesn't mean nothing does. It means you've learned to be the one thing that stays still in a world that won't stop moving. Let me take you back to something simple. You're driving. It's been a tough morning. You're late, the coffee spilled, the emails are already piling up. And then someone cuts you off in traffic, slams right in front of you. No signal, no apology, just gone. What happens next? For most people, it's instant. A heart rate up, voice raised, maybe a horn, maybe a curse, but definitely a reaction, a loss of control. One action from someone else and everything changes in you. That's the point right there. That thing we don't even notice. Someone else acts and we react. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every time you let something outside of you control what happens inside you, you've given away power. You've handed it over like it's nothing. But it is something. It's everything. Because control, real control, doesn't come from holding the world together. It comes from holding yourself together even when the world doesn't cooperate. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not. It's incredibly hard. We live in a world that's constantly pulling on our attention, our emotions, our expectations. And sometimes it feels like the only way to survive is to fight back, push harder, shout louder, do more. But think about the people who really influence you. The ones who walk into a room and everything calms down. The ones who make decisions not from pressure, but from purpose. The ones who don't flinch even when everything's falling apart. What makes them different? They've learned that while you can't control every situation, you can always control your response. And that's where real leadership starts. See, the greatest strength isn't in control over others, it's in control over yourself. It's easy to act composed when everything's going your way. It's easy to smile when the results are good, when the meetings go well, when people agree with you. But what happens when they don't? What happens when you're misunderstood, when plans fall apart, when people say things that sting? That's the test. Because the world will test you again and again. And the people who rise above it, they're not superhuman. They just made a choice, a powerful one. They've chosen not to be governed by their environment. They've chosen to live from the inside out, not the outside in. And that choice gives them clarity in chaos. It gives them direction when others are lost. It gives them the ability to act, not react, and that is what it means to act as if nothing affects you. It doesn't mean you don't feel, it doesn't mean you're detached or emotionless. Quite the opposite. It means you feel deeply and choose wisely. Let me say that again. You feel deeply and choose wisely. There's nothing noble about pretending pain doesn't exist. There's nothing heroic about bottling everything up. But there is something extraordinary about a person who can feel everything and still remain grounded, still remain intentional, still remain in control of their own behavior. Because life doesn't ask for your emotions to disappear. It asks for your response to be aligned with your values, not your impulses. And that takes work. It takes practice. It takes awareness. You don't just wake up with that kind of discipline. You build it slowly through the little moments, through the traffic jams, the difficult conversations, the missed opportunities, the criticism. You build it every time you pause before you speak, every time you breathe before you react, every time you decide not to take something personally even when you could. And here's what happens when you do. You start to carry peace, not just pursue it. You start to become the kind of person others rely on, not because you have all the answers, but because you have a calm they can trust. You start to become an anchor. In a world addicted to reaction, to outrage, to drama, to noise, you become the one who listens, who waits, who responds but doesn't react, who stands firm when others sway. And let me tell you, that's not weakness, that's power. Because the most powerful people are not those who control the most, but those who need the least control over others to stay at peace with themselves. You want to act as if nothing affects you? Start here. Start by understanding that nothing can make you feel anything without your permission. Not the criticism, not the rejection, not the chaos, not even the compliments. And when you stop giving everything outside of you that kind of access to your state of mind, something changes. You begin to lead from a place of purpose, not pressure. You begin to show up with intention, not tension. You begin to see life differently, not as something to survive, but as something to steer. Because you're no longer being driven by the wind, you're sailing by your compass. And yes, you'll still get knocked around. You'll still feel the waves, but you won't let them decide your direction. That's what it means to learn to act as if nothing affects you. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've started choosing. You know how people misunderstand strength? They think it looks loud, bold, aggressive. They think the strongest person in the room is the one talking the most, moving the fastest, acting the busiest. But real strength, real leadership is quiet. It's found in the space between the chaos and the choice, in the breath before the response, in the moment when everything is shouting at you to do something and you choose to be still. Stillness isn't passive. It's not weakness. It's not disengagement. It's power. Controlled, centered, focused. Because in a world where most people are ruled by urgency, by noise, by emotion, by the constant pressure to react, stillness becomes a competitive advantage. It's the separator. You see, we live in a reaction-based culture. Something happens, we respond instantly. A tweet, a text, a trigger, boom, reaction. We're trained for speed, for immediate output, for fast opinions. But there's a cost to that kind of living. The cost is depth. The cost is clarity. When you don't make space between what happens and what you do, you surrender choice. You hand over control to the moment, to emotion, to impulse, to fear. And when you give away that space, you give away your leadership. Stillness is how you get that space back. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right thing, not the fast thing. Stillness gives you the power to observe instead of absorb, to understand instead of overreact, to ask what really matters right now instead of what do I need to do next. And in high-pressure situations, in boardrooms, classrooms, locker rooms, or living rooms, the person who can remain still is the one people look to, not because they have all the answers, but because they don't panic. They don't add to the noise. They anchor the moment. They give others permission to slow down, to breathe, to think. That's what stillness does. It creates space, and space creates better decisions. Think about a time when you made a poor decision, not because you didn't know what to do, but because you felt rushed, cornered, emotionally hijacked. You acted on instinct, not intention. You felt something and you had to do something. And later, you looked back and thought, I knew better. You probably did. But knowing doesn't matter if you don't give yourself the space to remember it. Stillness is what brings that knowing to the surface. It allows your deeper wisdom to show up before your weaker impulses do. But let's be honest, stillness isn't natural, especially not now. We're constantly bombarded with information, distractions, expectations. We think if we're not doing, we're falling behind. And if we're not moving, we're missing something. But sometimes not moving is the most powerful move you can make. Think about nature. A lion doesn't roar before it strikes. It waits, it watches, it studies. It's still until the moment matters. Or consider the eye of a hurricane. Everything around it is destruction, swirling, chaotic, violent. But at the center, complete calm. That's what true power looks like. Not in the noise, but in the presence, in the steadiness, in the ability to stay centered while everything else spins. Stillness teaches you how to become that center. And that doesn't mean you'll never feel shaken. It doesn't mean you won't be impacted by stress, by fear, by pressure. You're human. You'll feel it all. But stillness gives you the ability to choose what to do with it. And instead of reacting to criticism with defensiveness, stillness lets you listen. Instead of reacting to failure with self-doubt, stillness lets you learn. Instead of reacting to chaos with anxiety, stillness lets you lead. And the people who master that, the ones who can stay grounded under pressure, they're the ones others trust. Not because they always get it right, but because they don't get rattled. They make decisions with a clear mind, not a crowded one. It's funny, we often think charisma is what draws people to leaders, the charm, the presence, the words, but often it's something much simpler. It's the way they make people feel. And nothing makes people feel safer, more confident, more hopeful than being in the presence of someone who isn't easily shaken. Someone who has trained their nervous system to stay calm when it would be easier to react. Someone who pauses when others panic. Someone who brings clarity into chaos just by being present. You don't need a title for that. You don't need a spotlight. You don't even need the loudest voice in the room. You just need stillness. Because when you walk into a storm and your feet don't move, people notice. They trust you. Not just because of what you say, but because of what you don't say. Because of what you don't do. Because of what you refuse to react to. And that becomes your influence. You don't have to control the storm. You just have to not become it. Stillness allows you to do that, to rise above the noise, to lead from presence, not panic, to act as if nothing affects you. Not because nothing does, but because you've trained yourself to move only when it matters. And that kind of strength, it does make a scene, but it changes everything. We've grown up hearing the same advice over and over again. Don't take it personally. Don't let it get to you. Grow thicker skin. And while that advice might sound useful, it often leads us down the wrong path. We start to believe that maturity means feeling nothing, that strength means shutting down, that leadership means having no emotion. But that's not strength. That's just armor. And armor might protect you in the short term, but it also cuts you off from people, from connection, from yourself. So let's get one thing clear. Emotional maturity doesn't mean being cold. It doesn't mean pretending you don't feel pain, frustration, sadness, or fear. It means feeling it all and still choosing how you respond. It means knowing the difference between having emotions and being run by them. You see, emotions are signals. They tell us something. Anger says a boundary has been crossed. Sadness says we've lost something important. Fear says there's risk ahead. Joy says something matters. But when you don't know how to process those signals, you either bury them or you let them drive the car. Neither works. If you bury them, they show up later in your tone, your relationships, your health. And if you let them take the wheel, you'll find yourself making decisions you regret, saying things you didn't mean, and reacting in ways that don't reflect who you are, but only how you felt in that moment. Emotional maturity is the space between the feeling and the action. It's the moment when you recognize what's rising up in you, and instead of being consumed by it, you examine it. You ask, where is this coming from? Is this about them or is it about me? Is this reaction helpful or just habitual? That's where personal growth lives, in that pause. Because when you can separate your emotion from your reaction, you give yourself something rare, choice. You give yourself agency. And that choice is what separates leaders from followers, builders from reactors, professionals from amateurs. Think about it. Anyone can react. A comment triggers you, you snap. A result disappoints you, you shut down. Someone pushes your buttons, you push back harder. That's easy. That takes no discipline, no self-awareness. But to feel the heat rising and not let it overflow, to feel the sting of criticism and not immediately defend yourself, to feel the surge of frustration and still speak with kindness, that's not weakness, that's power. And let me be clear, this doesn't mean you suppress your truth. It doesn't mean you become a doormat. Emotional maturity doesn't mean becoming emotionally mute. It means becoming emotionally wise. It means learning the difference between venting and communicating, between reacting and responding, between expressing and exploding. Because there's a cost to letting your emotions lead. There's a cost to giving every feeling an instant voice. You might feel better in the moment, but long term, you lose trust, you lose respect. On the other hand, when people know that you can handle hard conversations with grace, when they know that you won't crumble under pressure or lash out when stressed, when they know that you'll hear them even when you don't agree, they follow you. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Because emotional maturity creates psychological safety. It creates consistency. It builds trust. People don't need leaders who feel nothing. They need leaders who can feel everything without falling apart. They need someone who can sit with discomfort, hold space for disagreement, manage their own reactions, and model what it means to stay calm. And here's what's powerful. When you do that, when you lead from intention, not impulse, you give others permission to do the same. You raise the emotional standard of the room. Your presence regulates the room, and your behavior teaches people how to carry their own emotion with more maturity. Because people don't learn how to respond to stress from your lectures. They learn from your example. Your example, whether you realize it or not, is always teaching. So when we talk about learning to act as if nothing affects you, it's not about being numb or detached. It's about being grounded. It's about being clear on what gets to influence you and what doesn't. It's about choosing to live by your values even when your feelings are loud, especially when your feelings are loud. Because anyone can act in alignment with their values when they're in a good mood. When things get hard, when you're disappointed, frustrated, embarrassed, or angry, that's when your maturity shows. That's when people see who you really are. And make no mistake, you will be tested. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. People will say the wrong things, they'll misread your intentions, plans will fall through, success will take longer than you thought, your patience will wear thin. But every time you choose presence over panic, clarity over chaos, and intention over instinct, you win. Not just in the moment, but in the long run. You win influence, you win respect, you win peace. And most of all, you win back ownership of your own behavior, which is the one thing that's always yours. So feel it all, let it rise, let it teach you, but don't let it drive you. Feel the frustration and still choose patience. Feel the anger and still choose to move forward. That is what it means to be emotionally mature. That is what it means to act as if nothing affects you. Not because you don't feel it, but because you've learned not to let it control you. There's a kind of confidence we admire, the grounded, calm, collected presence of someone who doesn't need to raise their voice, show off, or fight for attention. The kind of person who can walk into a room and shift the energy, not with force, but with certainty. That's real confidence, and it doesn't come from what they say. Most people think confidence is loud, that it's bold statements and big energy, proving how smart or strong or capable you are. But that's not confidence, that's performance. That's the kind of thing we do when we're trying to be seen, trying to be validated, trying to feel enough. The problem is, the more you need to prove your worth, the less people actually trust it. Because confidence that needs to be validated by the outside world, that's not confidence, that's insecurity in disguise. Real confidence is quiet, it's subtle. It's not about having control over the room, it's about having control over yourself. Because the person who's truly confident doesn't flinch at criticism. They don't chase approval. They don't rush to explain, defend, or prove. Why? Because they already know who they are. And when you know who you are, not everything needs a reaction. Not every challenge requires a fight. Not every misunderstanding deserves a correction. You don't need to win the moment because you're not living for the moment. And that's what most people miss. Acting as if nothing affects you doesn't mean nothing ever hurts or that nothing ever shakes you. It means you're so rooted in your values, your vision, and your self-awareness that the outside world doesn't get to decide how you show up. The chaos can swirl, the pressure can rise, the noise can grow, but your foundation stays steady because your confidence isn't built on opinion, it's built on ownership. You own your flaws, you own your growth. You own your story, all of it. And when you do, no one else can weaponize it. That's power. You don't need to impress, you need to be aligned. Alignment is where confidence grows. When your actions match your values, when your behavior reflects your character, when you don't have to fake it because you're living it, that's when you become someone people listen to. Not because you demand their attention, but because you earn their respect. And the moment you stop needing to react to everything, the moment you stop trying to constantly prove who you are, you free up your energy for what actually matters. You stop chasing arguments and start building impact. You stop defending your value and start delivering it. You stop asking, "What do they think of me?" and start asking, "What legacy am I building here?" Because here's the thing. Every time you react to prove something, you lose a piece of your peace. Every time you let your ego lead the conversation, you move further away from clarity. And every time you get pulled into drama, you shrink your own capacity for growth. And when you stay grounded, when you choose presence over performance, something shifts. You walk into rooms with calm instead of comparison. You hear feedback without falling apart. You handle success without needing applause. And you handle failure without losing your sense of self. That's not just emotional maturity, that's confidence at its highest level. The kind of confidence that doesn't need the world to agree with you for you to know your worth. It's easy to look strong when everyone's clapping. It's easy to feel confident when the results are coming in, the likes are high, the comments are affirming you. But true confidence shows up in the silence, in the quiet moments when no one's watching, no one's validating, no one's agreeing. In those moments, do you still show up with integrity? Do you still choose discipline over drama? Do you still speak with clarity even when no one else understands you yet? That's the real test. And most people miss it because they're too busy reacting to noise that doesn't matter. They're too busy defending themselves to actually grow themselves. They're too busy trying to be seen to remember they're already worthy. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You need to be aligned. You don't need to be perfect to be respected. You need to be real. You don't need to win every argument. You need to walk in peace, knowing that not every battle deserves your energy. Because when you carry that kind of internal security, you don't have to act tough. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to mask fear with arrogance or mask hurt with aggression. You simply show up with strength, with poise, with quiet conviction. And in a world that constantly tries to get a rise out of you, that kind of calm, that kind of restraint, that's magnetic. It says, I'm not here to fight for attention. I'm here to do the work. It says, I'm not shaken by your noise. I've done too much inner work to give away my power that easily. It says, I don't need to act like nothing affects me. I've just learned to not let it control me. That's the shift. And when you make that shift from reactive to responsive, from loud to intentional, from insecure to grounded, you start living from a place of quiet strength. And quiet strength always outlasts loud insecurity. So stop trying to be unshakable by pretending nothing gets to you. Be unshakable because you've trained yourself to stay centered, stay calm, and stay grounded no matter what the world throws your way. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much to give your energy to anything less than your purpose. We all have that moment when something unexpected happens, and before we can even think, we've already reacted. Maybe we snap, maybe we shut down, maybe we fire back with words we don't mean. Whatever the case, it happens so fast it almost feels automatic. And in a way, it is, because we're wired that way. Our brains are built to react, to protect, to defend, to preserve. It's primal, it's fast, it's emotional. And for most of us, that's how we live. Something happens and we react over and over again. What separates the people who just survive and the people who lead, the ones who inspire, who influence, who stay centered in the middle of the storm, is not that they don't react, but that they've learned to pause. They've trained themselves to respond, not react, because the reaction is instinct, the response is intentional. And in between those two is a space, a choice. That space, that fraction of a second where you catch yourself, where you breathe, where you decide, that's where leadership begins. That's where you stop being driven by what's happening around you and start living by what matters inside you. Let's be honest, reaction is easy. It's automatic. It takes no effort, no awareness, no discipline. The comment stings, you clap back. The meeting goes sideways, you shut down. The delay hits and your day spirals. But every time you react on autopilot, you're letting the outside world dictate who you are. You're letting circumstance write your script. You're surrendering your power, quietly, consistently, one trigger at a time. Now here's the shift. When you respond instead, you take the wheel back. You see the trigger and you choose your behavior. You acknowledge the emotion, but you don't let it decide your next move. You feel the impulse, but you don't follow it blindly. That's not weakness, that's mastery. The people who inspire trust, the people others want to follow, aren't the ones who never get triggered. They're the ones who've learned how to manage what comes after the trigger. They take that pause, they create that space, and they fill that space with wisdom instead of reaction. And this isn't about perfection, it's about intention. You will still feel frustration, anger, fear, doubt because you're human. But how you act on those feelings, that's where growth lives. That's where leadership lives. Reactions say, I'm at the mercy of the moment. Responses say, I'm anchored in something deeper. It could be your values, your mission, your clarity about who you are and what kind of person you want to be. But whatever it is, it becomes the filter you run your behavior through. Not your mood, not your stress, not your ego, but your intentions. And when your intentions lead your actions, something shifts. You stop chasing control over everything because you found control over yourself. You stop trying to win every argument because you've learned how to win back your peace. You stop being triggered by everything because you've decided that not everything deserves your energy. That's what makes a person powerful. Because let's face it, if everything gets a reaction out of you, then everything owns you. The rude comment, it owns you. The person who misunderstood you, they own your peace, your time, your attention. And when you start noticing how often you give yourself away like that, it becomes clear. You don't need to control everything. You just need to stop letting everything control you. It's a shift from reacting to responding. Reaction is noise. Response is signal. Reaction is chaos. Response is clarity. Reaction is survival. Response is strategy. And strategy is what builds momentum. It's what turns days into progress, tension into influence, and challenge into growth. Let's take a moment here. Think of a person you admire, someone who just seems grounded. Not because they never face pressure, but because they don't get pulled into drama. They don't get rattled easily. They listen before they speak. They think before they move. They're intentional with their energy. Chances are that person is a master responder. They've built the muscle of response slowly, intentionally, day by day. Because that kind of poise, it's not natural. It's trained in the ordinary moments, the frustrating ones, the small everyday triggers that give you the choice. Do I react or do I respond? And every time you choose to respond, you're not just avoiding conflict or drama, you're building character, you're strengthening your presence, you're showing others that emotional maturity is possible. That power isn't about control, it's about self-control. So the next time something triggers you, stop just for a second, breathe. Ask yourself, what outcome do I want here? What's the story I'm telling myself about this moment? What kind of person do I want to be on the other side of this? And then respond, not from your ego, not from your insecurity, not from your fear, but from your clarity, from your values, from your vision. Because when you make that shift from reaction to response, you reclaim your agency. You step into leadership, and not just leadership in your job or your team, but leadership of yourself. And when you can lead yourself well, everything changes. You stop being a passenger in your own life. You stop being at the mercy of mood swings, hard days, and people who don't see you clearly. You start moving with purpose, not pressure. And the people around you, they feel that, they mirror that, they learn from that. So yes, reactions are natural, but responses are powerful. And when you learn to choose your response, you learn to act as if nothing affects you, not because you're numb, but because you're in command, not of the world, but of yourself.